Right now, somewhere in your head, there's a song playing. There always is. Maybe it's something you heard this morning. Maybe it's a jingle you hate. Maybe it's just a rhythm your foot is tapping without your permission. And here's a question that sounds almost too simple until you actually try to answer it. Who was the first person to ever make one? Not the first band, not the first song you'd recognize. The first human being ever to open their mouth or bang two things together and make music instead of noise. Seriously, sit with that for a second. Somebody, somewhere, was the first. And they had no idea they were inventing one of the only things that every single human culture on Earth would go on to share. Because here's what's strange about music. It's older than farming. It's older than writing. It's older than cities, older than metal, older than the wheel by tens of thousands of years. It might be older than our species. And the honest truth, the thing the experts will actually admit if you press them, is that we still don't fully know how it started. We have bones. We have caves. We have a couple of objects that stop archaeologists in their tracks. And we have one argument that has been running for over 150 years about why humans sing at all. The deeper you go, the stranger it gets. And the last piece of this might change the way you hear your own voice. So let's actually try to answer it. Here's the first problem, and it's a big one. Before you can find the first instrument, you have to understand what you're even looking for, and the very first musical instrument wasn't a thing at all. It was a body. Think about what a human can do with nothing. You can clap. You can stamp your feet. You can slap your chest, your thighs, hum, whistle, and sing. All of that is music, and none of it leaves anything behind. There's no artifact to dig up. A voice doesn't fossilize. A clap doesn't survive 50,000 years in the dirt. So the actual birth of music, the first time a human deliberately made a pleasing sound, is almost certainly invisible to us forever. It happened, and it left no trace. To picture how far back that goes, you have to picture the world before any of it. No recordings, obviously. No radio. But also no rooms, no walls to hold a sound in. Just cold and dark and enormous silence, broken by wind and animals and the crackle of fire if you were lucky enough to have one. Into that silence, at some point, a human being made a sound on purpose, not a scream of fear, not a warning, a pattern. Something that felt good to make and good to hear. And then, somewhere, something changed. Because eventually, humans stopped relying on just their bodies. They started building things. And that is where the story finally becomes something we can hold in our hands. Which brings us to a cave in Slovenia and an object that has been starting fights among archaeologists for 30 years. In 1995, a team led by an archaeologist named Ivan Turk was excavating a cave called Divje Babe. And in a layer of sediment packed with stone tools, next to the remains of an ancient fire pit, they found a fragment of bone, the thigh bone of a young cave bear, and punched into it were holes, evenly spaced holes. The kind of holes that, if you saw them on any modern instrument, you would instantly call finger holes. Here's why that bone is so explosive. The layer it came from is somewhere around 50 to 60,000 years old. And at that time, in that place, the humans living there weren't people like you. They were Neanderthals. So if those holes were made on purpose, this isn't just the oldest instrument in the world. It's proof that our extinct cousins, the ones the movies love to draw as grunting brutes, were sitting in caves making music before our species even showed up in Europe. You're telling me Neanderthals had flutes? That's the claim. And it's a beautiful one. There's just one problem. A lot of very serious scientists think it's completely wrong. Because here's the counter-argument, and it's not a weak one. That cave wasn't just a home for humans. It was a den for carnivores. And when a hyena or another predator chews on a bone, its teeth can punch clean, round, surprisingly regular holes straight through it. So the question that has split this field for decades is brutally simple. Did a Neanderthal carve those holes with a tool, or did an animal bite them while gnawing lunch? The truth is, we don't know for certain. Turk's team ran experiments and argued the spacing and the shape were far too deliberate to be an accident, even claiming the bone was shaped for a right-handed player. Other researchers, including a study covered by National Geographic, looked at the same holes and said, "That's a carnivore. That's teeth." And no outside scholar who studied it ever fully confirmed it as a flute. So the oldest musical instrument on Earth might be a masterpiece of the Stone Age. Or it might be a bone somebody's dinner chewed on. And honestly, that uncertainty is the most human part of the whole story. We are still arguing about the very first note. But here's the good news. If you want an instrument that nobody can argue with, you just have to travel to Germany and come forward about 15,000 years. Because there, in a cave called Hohle Fels, is an object that ends the debate cold. In 2008, an archaeologist named Nicholas Konrad from the University of Tübingen was digging in that cave. And his team pulled out a flute. Not a maybe flute, a real one, in 12 pieces that fit back together into a slender instrument about the length of your forearm. 5 finger holes. A carefully carved V-shaped notch at the end to blow across. And it was made from the hollow wing bone of a griffon vulture, a bird with a wingspan wider than you are tall. They published it in the journal Nature in 2009, and it is, without dispute, the oldest recognized musical instrument in the world, around 40,000 years old. Now think about what that actually took. This wasn't someone idly poking a stick. Someone chose that bone because it was hollow and light. Someone measured out where the hole should go. Someone cut a mouthpiece. That's not an accident. That's craft. That's a person who already understood, deep in their bones, what a flute was supposed to be and how to build one. And here's the detail that gives me chills. In the same cave, right next to the flutes, Konrad's team found other things. They found fragments of flutes carved from mammoth ivory, which is staggeringly hard to work, meaning these people were spending serious time and skill on instruments. And less than a meter from the bone flute, they found a small carved figure of a woman, one of the oldest pieces of figurative art ever discovered. Read that again. In one spot, in one layer, 40,000 years ago, you have music and sculpture side by side. That's not survival, that's culture. These were people who had food figured out well enough that they had time left over to carve art and make instruments and presumably sit around a fire and play them. The wheel wouldn't be invented for another 30,000 years after this, writing even longer. But the flute was already here, so now we've got instruments. But that just cracks open a much bigger question, the one that actually matters. Not when, but why. Why would humans, scraping to survive in an ice age, spend precious time making music at all? What is it for? And this is where the real fight begins, because it's a fight that started with Charles Darwin himself. Back in 1871, Darwin looked at music and it genuinely puzzled him. It didn't obviously help you hunt or hide or eat. So why did we have it? His answer was that music came from courtship. That before humans could even speak in words, our ancestors were charming each other with musical notes and rhythm, the way birds do. In his view, the best singers got the mates. Music, to Darwin, was a love song older than language itself. But that's just one theory, and here's where it gets interesting. Some researchers think Darwin had it backwards on one crucial point. Music might not just have come before words. Music might be where words came from. An archaeologist named Stephen Mythen laid this out in a book with an unforgettable title, The Singing Neanderthals. His idea is that our ancestors had something before proper language, a kind of communication that was half music, half speech. Not words with grammar, but sounds carrying emotion, rising and falling, holding a group together. And over hundreds of thousands of years, that single musical stream slowly split in two. One branch became language, the other became music, which would mean the song and the sentence are twins, born from the same ancient sound. And then there's the third camp, the one with the most modern evidence behind it. This one says music is glue. It's about bonding a group together. Think about what happens when people move in sync. When a group sings together, drums together, dances together, something measurable happens in the body. Synchronized movement and rhythm trigger the release of chemicals linked to trust and connection. The same systems that bond a mother to a child. It literally makes strangers feel like one unit. And in the Ice Age, that was not a luxury. That was survival. Picture it. You're one of maybe 30 people. Winter is coming, and 30 people who trust each other, who move as one, who can coordinate a hunt and share food and defend each other, will live. 30 people who don't, who fracture into suspicious individuals, will die. And one of the oldest, deepest tools humans ever found for turning a crowd of individuals into a single trusting unit was rhythm, was song. Music may have been, quite literally, a survival technology. The thing that held the group together when the cold came. So which is it? Courtship, language, or glue? The honest answer is that it might be all three, tangled together, and we may never fully separate them. But that argument, running from Darwin's desk to today's laboratories, tells you something on its own. The question of why we sing is one of the oldest questions we've never stopped asking. There's one last layer, though, and I saved it for the end, because it's the strangest part of all of this. Every theory we just talked about, the courtship, the proto-language, the bonding, they all point at the same quiet fact. Music isn't something humans invented, the way we invented the wheel. It's something we appear to have been born with. Reach into any culture on Earth, anywhere, any era, tribes with no contact with each other on opposite sides of the planet, and you will find music. Every single one. There is no known human society without it. None. Think about what that means. You could take a baby from that Ice Age cave 40,000 years ago and a baby from today, and both of them would respond to a lullaby. Both would move to a beat. That impulse, that pull toward rhythm and melody, isn't learned from your culture. It came pre-installed. It's older than your language, older than your country, older than your species, and it's still running right now. That song in your head, the one from the very first sentence that never quite goes away, that's not a modern quirk. That's a 40,000-year-old piece of equipment, still switched on, humming away inside you exactly the way it hummed, inside someone crouched by a fire, carving holes into the wing bone of a vulture. So, how did humans invent music? Here's the real answer. They probably didn't invent it at all. Not the way we mean that word. The first instrument was the body, and it left no trace. The first flute we can argue about might be Neanderthal, or might be a chewed bone in a Slovenian cave. The first flute we can't argue about sang out of a vulture's wing 40,000 years ago in a German cave, next to a carved goddess, made by people who already knew exactly what they were doing. And underneath all of it runs an impulse we didn't create and can't shake, one that Darwin puzzled over and we're still puzzling over today. They sang before they wrote. They sang before they farmed. They may have sung before they truly spoke. Which means music isn't a thing we made, it's a thing we are. So the next time a song gets stuck in your head and won't leave, and you catch your foot tapping to a beat you never chose, remember what that actually is. It's not random, it's the oldest part of you still playing. You're not hearing a song, you're remembering how to be human.